On a week where it's tough to find value, we'll help you find a couple of receivers that'll open up your lineups. Welcome to the Week 12 main slate edition of the Football Guys Daily Fantasy Power Grid presented by DraftKings. This is our main slate show. We also have a Thanksgiving slate show, double episode week for Thanksgiving. So check out both of our episodes. We're going to dive into the main slate here and talk about Vegas. John, what do the Vegas lines look like on the main slate this week?
Week 12, Dirty Dozen. We're there. I mean, who would have thought we would have made it there in the year of the pandemic? But yet here we are. 12 games on the main slate, 5 of them in the neighborhood of 50 or higher in terms of Vegas totals. At the top of the list, and I love this game. I can't wait to talk about it. Kansas City visiting Tampa Bay on a week after Tom Brady kind of laid an egg against. Why can't I remember who he laid an egg against? Who did he lay the egg? Prime time, guys, help me out here.
Oh, he laid an egg against New Orleans.
New Orleans, thank you. So he laid an egg there. Las Vegas against Atlanta, 55.5, which is just a notch down from that. There's a lot of goodness to be had there. The Chargers going up against Buffalo. We're going to talk about that game. I think that has some interesting plays as well. One that would have gone under the radar, I think, for the lay person, is Tennessee up against the Colts in Indianapolis. That one actually has 51 points. So we're talking about a lot of points here. And then the last one, Arizona's high-flying offense going up against New England. They're going up to Foxborough. That one's just a hair shy of 50 points, but I included they're at 49.5. So I think this will be a high-scoring week this week. And the question is, as you're thinking about like building your lineups, if you're a 1 to 5 lineup person, which of those 5 games is going to go most under the radar, and how do you stack that up and then build out your lineups? And I think tonight we're going to talk about some ways to do that, and cash games, GPPs. There's a lot of stuff happening here, so I'll hand it back to you, Austin. But love this week.
Did you say the Raiders and the Falcons, or did you miss that one?
I said it.
Okay, I'm not paying attention. Clearly.
That was
and John,
the second one.
I think Brady has had struggled in 2 out of the last 3 games. The New Orleans goose egg was 3 weeks ago. You may have been referring to him losing to the Rams last week, where he didn't put up especially impressive numbers. He's angry either way. Angry Brady. You don't want to cross him.
Yeah.
That was the game I was talking about. He threw 2 interceptions against the Rams. Now the Rams, we can talk a little bit about that, but they've got a couple great defensive backs there. Jalen Ramsey, everybody knows, but there's another one who's been flying under the radar for most of the season, and I think it merits additional consideration in terms of the strength of that secondary and why Tom Brady might be in play this week despite coming off of a really bad game on Monday Night Football, and then, as you said, 2 of the last 3 weeks not playing well. So I really do like this slate. It's going to be extremely interesting.
Yeah. Phil, let's go to quarterbacks. We got 2 injury situations. Joe Burrow obviously is out with that awful knee injury from last week, so we'll be seeing Ryan Finley starting there, and then Teddy Bridgewater may make it back this week. Again, we're recording on Tuesday night, a little earlier than we usually do this week, so it's a little fuzzy as to whether it's Bridgewater or PJ Walker starting for the Panthers this week at Minnesota.
And Kyler Murray's limited with the shoulder.
He's got like that shoulder thing, but he came back into the game and finished it out, right? So it's like, he's probably going to go, but it might be worth keeping an eye on, right?
Yeah.
Phil, tell me, which quarterbacks do you like this week?
Sure. For cash games, first name I'm looking at is Josh Allen at 7,600. He seems to have gotten over the second quarter of the season swoon that he was dealing with. He's now got consecutive games of 30-plus points on DraftKings, or close enough to it. The Bills' defense can't contain good offenses. The Chargers qualify as a good offense. The Chargers, every one of their games has gone over 50 points total since week 3. They're out here drawing the Broncos, Dolphins, and Jets into high-scoring games. This one is just going to be in my opinion, the one that you want to attack the most from a DFS perspective this week. It's an obvious game to stack in either direction. If you can't get up to Allen in cash, I think there are two options that you could drop down to. One, John mentioned the implied total for Las Vegas is especially high this week, and you got Derek Carr at 5,700. I'm a little leery of that play only because I could see the touchdowns going to Josh Jacobs. So I think who I'd actually be looking at is Daniel Jones, $200 less. So I don't know that you necessarily need to do it with Carr at 5,700, but there are a couple of reasons that I like Jones this week. The number one reason, of course, is that he's playing against the Bengals, and the Bengals are now starting Ryan Finley at quarterback, and I see a game script setting up where the Giants are going to have a lot of short fields to work with, and Jones is going to have some good scoring chances. He played well against the Eagles before the Giants bye week, and what I think is a little bit overlooked is that they've started calling runs for Daniel Jones, which is exactly what you should be doing if you have Daniel Jones. So since week 6, Jones has rushed for 254 yards. And for context, Kyler Murray has rushed for 323. That's not a whole lot more. It is more, 254 yards, than Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, Josh Allen, and Cam Newton over the same span.
Yeah, but two of them were on 170 of those came on 2 runs. So
he's capable of doing it. They're
if you're
calling
talking
run
short
plays
field,
and he's got 1 touchdown. Kyler Murray's got, and I'm not going to look it up, but he's got 10, right? I mean,
he's not Kyler Murray, guys. He's not Kyler Murray, but he's 5,500.
But you just said cash games.
I said cash games. Yes, I was playing the cash games. I think he's plenty good for 20 to 25 points this week.
John, who do you like at quarterback? It seemed like both John and Devin didn't care for the Daniel Jones pick in cash. Who is your cash game quarterback, John?
Look, if you can get up to him, and I'm not sure you can, we're going to talk about the cash game build here as the show evolves. But if you can, Kyler Murray is the guy. He's the most expensive guy on the slate. But what he has done this season in terms of running the ball, passing the ball, scoring touchdowns, he's in the top 12 in terms of rushing yards. He's in the top 3 in terms of touchdowns. He's the guy I want. I'm not sure I can get to him, though, if I'm being completely honest. So where I'm going is a $2,300 discount on DraftKings. I'm okay with going with Matt Ryan. That's probably the guy I'll end up going with. He's 5,700 going up against Las Vegas, and 5,900. You're correct, going up against Las Vegas. He's the guy that makes the most sense. I mean, it's the second highest second highest Vegas total, 55.5 points. I'm quite confident that Vegas is going to move the ball. I'm actually surprised. I think Devin must have been sleeping when Phil mentioned Derek Carr as a potential cash game candidate, because I thought he was going to lose his mind.
I like Derek Carr this week, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I'll stop talking in a second, because that's a hot take for sure. But if we're going to take one of the 2 quarterbacks here, it's going to be Matt Ryan for me, simply because he's a guy that at home I always want a piece of. And as I said, 5,900. For me, in cash games, he's the one that I want to build around if I can't get to Kyler Murray, which I'm pretty sure I can't, at least as of Tuesday night when we're recording.
Yeah, early in the week, it feels like there's not a ton of value, so quarterback may be a position where you're spending down a bit. Devin, you agreed with Phil on something. Are you a cyborg or an alien inside of Devin's body?
I mean, look, Derek Carr is a tremendous play this week, and I don't know if I agreed with Phil because he said Daniel Jones is a better play than Derek Carr. I don't know that I would go. I don't know that I would go there, and Phil and I are disagreeing more than Ryan and I disagreed. So last year, but anyway, look, Atlanta may have the best run defense in football. I mean, there's a very strong case to be made there that they have the best run defense in football. Since week 6, they're allowing 58 yards per game rushing, which is the second lowest, only to New Orleans. And they're averaging less than 3.4 yards per carry. So this is a defense that historically we've been start running backs against Atlanta. They're still having some issues, particularly against stopping running backs catching the ball. Josh Jacobs doesn't necessarily do that as much as other running backs, but that still helps Derek Carr too. So the way to beat Atlanta is through the air, and they're allowing 314 yards passing per game, which is the most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. Derek Carr's in a great spot, and I think he's playing at a much higher level than what people think of what we think of Derek Carr because of the last couple of years where he's kind of the boring guy, but he's a much better quarterback than that, at least this year. And the offensive line, they may have the best offensive line in football, if not top 5. So that's helping a lot too. However, with all that said, Matt Ryan is the guy. I trust him more. I trust him to get 300 yards, which is 15 points right off the bat. And I think he's just a little bit safer than Las Vegas, even though Derek Carr is in a great spot. Kyler Murray, the shoulder injury worries me. So how much is he going to run, knowing that? What are they? 7-3, 6-4, something like that. They have playoff aspirations, and if he's dealing with any sort of injury, I don't think that they're going to try and run him nearly as much as they need to, or that he otherwise will run. And then just looking down my list a little bit, I think Brady's interesting at 6,600. I think there's a scenario where he could throw for 4 touchdowns in this game, and I know John's going to pull some DVOA stat that says Kansas City's unbelievable at stopping the pass, but I still don't believe it. But I think that Brady is in a pretty good spot this week.
For the record,
As a
for the
GPP
audio
play.
listeners, John actually liked the Brady call on this one. Yeah, as a GPP play. Hey, and guess what? Taysom Hill's a quarterback on FanDuel this week, so don't try to play him at tight end. John, any other guys you want to mention?
Going to the GPP side, I talked about Kyler and Matt Ryan being cash game plays. I do like whoever is the quarterback for Carolina this week. We don't know who that's going to be as of now. Teddy Bridgewater, his status is still in question, but their upside is baked into it, so I'm okay with either one of them. But the one guy I want to talk about really quickly, can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Everything kind of went quiet for me. Is Pat Mahomes at 8,000?
Yeah.
It seems strange to talk about Pat Mahomes because he's always in play. But I just heard a couple guys, at least Devin said that he thinks the best running defense in the league is Atlanta. I'm going to disagree with that and say that
Tampa's
the best running defense. Yeah, Tampa is ridiculous against the run. I mean, I pulled up their running stats, or defensive running stats. They haven't allowed an opposing rusher to go for more than 59 yards all season. And if I look at the Vegas value chart, the highest team in terms of implied team total is Kansas City at 29.8 points. What that says to me is path of
bet the
resistance. Well, maybe it does mean that. But if Patrick Mahomes goes off on too few lineups this week, I love him going up against Tampa Bay, especially in a game that we've already talked about as being super high scoring. I'm going to sound like a broken record. This is a game that I will be stacking 6 ways to Sunday on Sunday, trying to figure out how to get the right players and the right correlations, because I think that everybody is in play in this game, particularly in the Kansas City passing side. And I think on the Tampa Bay side, it's probably more expansive, including those runners being Rojo as well as Leonard Fournette.
Yeah, the only problem there is going to be roster percentage. It's going to be the highest roster game.
Yep, I agree.
Please use the YouTube comments down below to tell us how much you love Phil's new neck tattoo due to the loss of the Miles Sanders bet last week. whether you just kind of like it or you like super love it. Just
It's not
let
very
us know.
red.
It's
more red.
I think if
Her-
Devin got one, he would get a red Black Eyed Joe tattoo, and then Phil would have like a yellow one. That would fit our branding.
Are there any other guys that we like here? Like, do we any love for Ryan Finley? Like, there's a ton of value.
Nope.
He threw 15 passes last week, and PFF came up, Pro Football Focus came up, said 5 of them are catchable. When a third of your patches are catchable, we can't do it. We've seen what he could do last year. I mean, I want to like it because there's a ton of value.
I'll put some numbers to it for you, John. It was 3 games that he started, never completed more than 53% of his passes. He turned the ball over 5 times and was sacked 11 times across those 3 games.
Well, you're getting to my favorite defense of the week by saying it's.
But he has a lot more options this year than he did in the. I don't disagree, but like 1 or 2 lineups, if you're putting 50 in, why not?
2%. Okay, I'll go with 2%. You can do that.
He has rushing upside. I mean, he's ran for 50 yards in a game before. He's not very good, but we've seen other not good quarterbacks have BS numbers. Like,
you're bordering on Cam Sims territory here.
I know.
2% exposure guy.
Yeah.
Bordering. He's like below the Cam Sims line, like by far.
We're talking about saving salary, and I had to bring him up.
Yeah, no, I don't think you're going to go that low. Let's talk about running backs. You've got Rex Burkhead out on injured reserve. You might get some San Francisco backfield guys back this week. Still a little fuzzy early in the week. Keep an eye on that if you care. And then LaMichael Pirine is out. So it might be, we might have to talk to the Frank Gore whisperer in this segment and see whether that's a thing or not in a revenge game against Miami. Actually, let's go to Devin first and talk about running backs.
The ageless wonder. I mean, look, he's 37 years old, and he's still getting 15 carries in producing. I mean, he is a lot better than Duke Johnson, who we talked about on our last show as a running back, and he's significantly cheaper. And in a better matchup. Miami can't stop the run, so why not? At 4,600, he's my favorite low-end guy. I think he's going to see 13 to 15 touches. He may or may not fall into the end zone, and if he does, he's going to reach value, and that's the biggest thing. So I think the biggest question is, where are we saving salary here? Because it certainly seems difficult on this week. I mean, Leonard Fournette at 4,900. Do we feel more comfortable with him? Not really. 4,300 is a really good price. I mean, he's in the territory of Nyheim Hines, who probably has more upside. Devin Singletary, not really, but I'm just naming names right now to name names. As a cash game play, I wouldn't play Gore in a GPP. I don't think he has that upside.
Right.
But I think as a cash game play, he has a floor that is low enough to play him.
You mean high enough to play him? A floor that's high enough.
Floor that's high enough, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, all right.
I didn't see any disagreement, so that's...
Well, it's tough. This is a tough position this week, right? I mean, it's barren in terms of value. The guys I have listed in cash are all expensive, and you're going to have to take some chances at the wide receiver and even in tight end position if you want to do that. The guys I like, Dalvin Cook, 9,500, so he's going to cost you 20% of your salary. Going up against Carolina. I do have Josh Jacobs here. I'll be interested to hear what Devin has to say about that in terms of going up against Atlanta, who he deemed to be one of the better rush defenses in the league. I don't disagree with that, for the record. They shut down Minnesota on a week that I was pretty high on Minnesota rushing running backs. And then James Robinson going up against Cleveland at 6,300. So I'm spending up at this position for cash games. I think you can go the opposite way for GPPs. And then I'm going to take some chances at the wide receiver position, simply because I want the volume associated with the guys that I've mentioned. but none of them, outside of maybe Dalvin Cook, make me feel entirely comfortable, because even James Robinson at 6,300, he's a 7-point underdog. He catches passes out of the backfield, but it still kind of bothers me that Jacksonville has an implied team total of 21 points. So it's a tough position this week. It'll be interesting to see what, how it kind of settles out as the week, injury situations and so forth.
And I think James Robinson's in a really good spot. I think that he might be the best value play at 6,300, and it's a little weird to say a $6,300 salary guy is a value play, but this Browns defense isn't nearly as good as what their stats say. I mean, Miles Sanders was gashing them before they play calling, and just, I don't know what the Eagles were doing, but they should have won that game fairly easily. He had 45 yards in the first drive of that game. So no Myles Garrett. The Browns are dealing with some COVID-related things as well. So I think that no Denzel Ward either. So they're going to put some more focus on the secondary, not have a one-on-one matchup with Ward. So I think that they'll have their safeties back. I think it's a really good spot for James Robinson.
And we kind of forgot to recap our quarterback cash picks. It was both John and Devin liking Matt Ryan, and it sounded like Phil might spend up a little bit, try to get Josh Allen into his lineup. But it sounds like kind of mid and high-priced guys may be the way that John's going at running back here. Phil, I want to understand kind of your build process a little bit this week. Are you looking at higher-priced running backs, or do you have some value guys you feel comfortable with in cash?
If we're talking about cash, John had the exact three names that I have written down. It's Dalvin Cook, Josh Jacobs, James Robinson, and that means that we're going to be taking some shots at wide receiver. I agree that Robinson for me is the best value on the slate. Devin mentioned Miles Sanders. It's almost as if he was on pace to have a 20-point game last week, almost, and then it just all kind of came crashing down. At any rate, for me with Robinson, it's less about the Browns and it's more about that workload. I mean, there's now a 10-game sample that we have of him this season. He's handled 96% of the team's rush attempts and 87% of the backfield touches. That kind of workload is almost unheard of, and I think it insulates him from the Jaguars' low total. He's just going to grind out the points you need for cash every week on that workload. So for GPPs, I like Nick Chubb. Interested to see what Devin's take is on the Browns, him being the resident Browns guy, but Chubb has the most 20-yard runs or 20-plus yard runs this season with 7, and that's one ahead of Kyler Murray. And Nick Chubb has missed over a month of football, so it's kind of wild how efficient that he's been. The only reason he's a GPP play and not a cash play is because obviously there's a timeshare there with Kareem Hunt where they're kind of splitting the snaps right down the middle. But he's just playing so well, and the defense that he's up against this week playing so poorly that 100-plus yards and multiple touchdowns are definitely in play. It's going to depend on his popularity, as always, in GPPs. But if he's low owned because people are shying away from the timeshare with Hunt, then I'm definitely going to be on him, and I don't mind Hunt either. At a $1,400 discount, I might kind of split my exposure to those guys and across similar lineups and see which one comes through. And then somebody a few minutes ago mentioned the other guy I have here, and that's Nyheim Hines. So with the Colts backfield, you're kind of playing whack-a-mole, and Jonathan Taylor just popped his head up. So I feel like if we try to take that swing on Taylor, he's going to pop his head back down, and Hines is going to pop up. But he's got upside, and Hines has 44% of the snaps over the last 2 weeks. Jordan Wilkins is being phased out over that same span. He's only got a 15% snap share. So now this is a 2-man backfield. That's a heck of a lot better than a 3-man backfield. He catches passes. He has big play upside. He even gets occasional goal line carries. And what they seem to be doing, Frank Reich and Indianapolis, is they give Jonathan Taylor a chance to start the game, have a couple of nice runs. If he has a couple of nice runs, they stick with him. And if he doesn't, then he's kind of out in favor of Hines. So it's almost like a coin flip scenario, who's going to have the most touches from week to week between Hines and Taylor. So I don't mind taking a poke on the guy who's going to be lower rostered this week. And I assume that's going to be Hines, even though he's coming off cheaper than Taylor by quite a bit.
Devin, any guys you want to mention for GPPs?
Yeah.
I haven't heard anybody mention Giovanni Bernard. Is it possible that Ryan Finley is the dump-off king and is just dropping this off? No.
No. I mean, is it possible? Sure, but not. They're not game planning around that, and we would have seen some of that last week, I think. I think a couple guys that haven't been mentioned. So the issue with Nick Chubb is that he has caught 3 passes all year. And as a FanDuel play, I think he's definitely in play. He's going to need 100 yards and 2 touchdowns just to pay off his $7,100 salary. And Kareem Hunt is top 5 in red zone carries. So that's a bit of a concern as far as who's getting the red zone carries. Some of that has been a little bit vultured by Chubb having a long run to get down there, and then Hunt comes in, but it's a little too much. So I tend to lean Hunt, I think, over the 2 just for the salary relief. One guy that wasn't mentioned is Wayne Gallman going up against Cincinnati. I love Wayne Gallman this week. I think that he might be ahead of Frank Gore on my cash game list. And if you haven't followed the Giants, and you probably don't have a lot of reason to, but Wayne Gallman has 4 touchdowns in his last 3 games, and they're all against good defenses. The Eagles, Washington, and Tampa. So 3 of the better defenses in football. And he's had 12, 14, and 18 carries, and he's only progressing upward. So at $5,000 for salary, I think he's cash game viable. It's scary, but if you're looking for salary relief, I think you could do worse with Wayne Gallman as we sit here on a Tuesday. Derrick Henry, I mean, the guy continues to go under rostered against Indianapolis at 7,300. I think I would prefer him to Nick Chubb. I would find 200 more. I think that he just has more.
Henry's 7,900, I think.
7,900.
Yeah.
Okay, 7,900. So I still prefer him to Nick Chubb.
Yeah.
But I think he's just more focal point of the offense. 8,300 on FanDuel is really good. The problem with FanDuel is that Dalvin Cook is $11,000 in terms of salary, which is probably where he should be. But can you go up to get 2 of those guys? Probably not. So the biggest question, I think, in every lineup that you build this week is, are you comfortable without Dalvin Cook? And the answer, to me, at least in cash, is absolutely not. I want Cook in all my cash game lineups, which, sort of limits where you can go from there. And $11,000 on FanDuel is a ridiculous price, but he's worth it. And we'll see.
John, any other guys you want to mention?
Look, I mean, I agree with what Devin just said. When you're on FanDuel, you're paying for touchdowns. When you're on DraftKings, you're paying for opportunity and receptions. And so, weighted accordingly. It's one of the beauties of being a player who plays on both sites. Love the Gallman call. He was a guy on my list. The 2 guys I'm gonna throw out for GPPs now, and I suspect I'm gonna get some pushback on the first guy. But we've already talked about how there's no value, and so people are going to be looking for ways to spend down. And we've heard Dalvin Cook's a great play. We've heard that Derrick Henry is potentially a decent GPP play, which I agree with. But Alvin Kamara is the focal point of an offense that last week he had 13 touches and 0 catches. Everybody is going to be off of this guy. I firmly believe that Sean Payton knows what he's doing, and he's going to find ways to get this guy the ball this week after seeing what he saw last week in a game where they kept up. But I really believe that Kamara is going to be a wonderful GPP play this week against Denver. And I already saw the red black eye Joe from Devin. So, I mean, we made it.
We don't need to talk about it. It's pretty clear.
It's very...
No, I mean it's clear. It's clear that a majority of the people aren't going to like him. So, in the rationale behind why is, I don't need to jump into it. I mean, 0 receptions, the touchdown equity goes down because of Hill's running ability. If you're a mass multi-entry guy like you are, fine. I mean, I think you can have 8, 10, 12% lineups. If you're a 10 GPP lineup guy, there's no way I'm doing it.
Okay. I mean, my final answer will be, by Friday or Saturday, I can tell you exactly how many percent I'll have him in. But I suspect he's going to be a sharp play this week. And then last week, I talked about this guy, and as I'm looking at myself, I can see I'm out of focus right now, which is great for the viewers who are watching.
Just lean in or out a little bit. Yeah, and then back. Not so fast. Just give it like a little...
All right.
Just keep talking. No one wants to hear about it.
Yeah, nobody really cares. I was about to say that it's probably a good thing. Last week, I recommended Melvin Gordon, and he scored a couple touchdowns. I'm going to recommend him again this week against New Orleans. New Orleans has a great rush defense, but he's affordably priced at 5,200. And if you look at what he's done this year, I'm actually curious, guys, and don't look it up. What?
No, I was about to look it up.
How many catches does Philip Lindsay have this season?
Not a lot.
I don't know. I mean,
I have no
11
idea.
games, 10 games.
21.
He has two catches. He has 2 catches all season. And so when you look at this line and you're saying, well, Denver's a 6-point underdog, well, Philip Lindsay is going to be in there. At least that's what I would have thought off of just gut feeling. But in reality, what's happened is it's been Melvin Gordon who's been in the lineup in losing situations. And I think that he's the guy, despite what I believe in my heart, and that is that Philip Lindsay's a better running back. The coaching staff in Denver disagrees, and they're giving him plenty of opportunity. And I think he's a really strong GPP play this week at 5,200 against the Saints.
All right, let's move on to wide receivers.
Please.
Summarize. Yes, good call. Let's summarize with the cash game plays. We've got a lot of love for Dalvin Cook if you're going to spend up, which people
Cook and
are like,
Robinson.
Get him in your cash game lineups. Then we got Robinson as the mid-range value guy, and then people seem to also like Josh Jacobs as a cash game play. Those seem to be the 3 big ones that I heard mentioned.
Gallman and Gore for me.
And then Gallman and Gore if you're paying down and need salary at other places.
Yep.
All right. That seems reasonable. Okay, let's talk about receivers. We've got, please hit subscribe, hit the bell so you get notifications, and give us a thumbs up. Wide receivers, a few receivers we're keeping an eye on here. There's Julio Jones dealing with a hamstring injury. He was in and out of the game in week 11. We'll track his status as the week goes on. Adam Thielen was added to the COVID list, but it's a little unclear as to whether he tested positive or was a close contact. He could still play this week. And similarly with Brandon Ayuk is on the COVID list. Those are the 3 I have my eye on. Let's go to Phil first to talk about wide receivers. What do you think about receivers this week?
Yeah, so I wish we had a little bit more clarity on Adam Thielen, because if he sits out, I think Justin Jefferson almost has to be in your cash game lineups. Without Thielen, you're talking about 28% of the team's targets that need to get dispersed. And yeah, guys like Chad Beebe and BC Johnson and Irv Smith, they're going to see an uptick and eat up some of them. But usually what happens in these situations is the targets consolidate around the most talented player in the offense, and they end up commanding more. And that's exactly what Jefferson is outside of Dalvin Cook, of course, in Minnesota. But there's been 3 games this year in which Jefferson has more than 5 targets. And in those games, he scored 33.5, 42.6, and 24.5 DraftKings points, respectively. So at 6,300, I just don't see any points to failure on Jefferson if Thielen is, in fact, out. And then The other guy that I'm looking at, because again,
can we talk about that
based
for
on
just
how-
a second? So,
Sure.
don't disagree. But what we've seen in the past, if Thielen is out, Jefferson's going to be 25, 30%, something like that. And we've seen in the past where some of these younger receivers get put into the number one role, they get doubled, and it makes it more difficult. So as a GPP play, there's a scenario, while he may be a great cash game play, there's a scenario where you may want to fade him if Adam Thielen is playing.
Where you may want to fade.
If Adam Thielen is out, sorry.
If Adam Thielen's out, that's what I thought you were getting at. Now, I just read a more recent news update. It says that Thielen may have tested positive and then tested negative. It sounds like it could be a false positive situation, but it's still a little fuzzy. So that's kind of the status for Thielen right now.
So as it stands now, and I don't have Adam Thielen is getting any points. Justin Jefferson, I have him right around 17 projected fantasy points. So as the week progresses, adjust up or adjust down. But at 17 fantasy points, I have Justin Jefferson at about 10% to make GPP value. And so if he goes up to 20 points, make that 18%. If that happens, if he's 30%, as Devin just said, he becomes a very, very bad GPP play for the reasons that has been discussed, and vice versa. If Thielen comes back in, you have to adjust accordingly. But as of today, at 16.8, he's about 10% to make GPP value.
Let's talk about some other guys here. Phil, who else you like?
Yeah, so sticking with cash games, the other guy, because again, we're going to have to attack that middle tier of wide receiver if our builds are going expensive quarterback and 2 or 3 expensive running backs. The guy that jumped out to me at 5,000 on DraftKings was Michael Pittman. He came back from compartment syndrome, which I understand is a pretty terrible, I don't know if you call it an injury or an ailment, but whatever it is, since he got his legs back under him in week 9, he's emerged as that team's wide receiver 1. He's really given them a boost, leading the team in targets, receptions, and receiving yards over that stretch. Last week, he was able to do enough on one play to overcome a tough matchup against those Green Bay cornerbacks. And this week, the matchup isn't nearly as tough. So I really like Pittman at 5,000. And then moving on to GPPs, I like DeVante Parker again. He was one of my heavier plays last week, and he could have had 2 touchdowns. It wasn't in the cards though. But speaking of targets consolidating around the best player when another receiver goes down, that's exactly what's happening in Miami with Parker since Preston Williams is out. Listen, he's up against the Jets secondary. You saw them in action last week against Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Turned out just fine for those guys. And that's going to be whether, and I guess we didn't really talk too much about Tua and that situation with him getting benched last week. But regardless of who's throwing him the ball, I like Parker quite a bit. And if somehow it happens to be Fitzpatrick, which at the time of this recording seems unlikely, then I think you could just go over the moon at 5,900 for DeVante Parker. He'd become an excellent play. And as it is, he's still a very good play with Tua. And then the last guy on my list here, and again, this is for GPPs, is Robbie Anderson. I think people are starting to get a little bit tired of I really must be on the sharp side of it this week with John holding up all these yellow black-eyed Joes. Makes me feel a little bit better about the hate I received for that Daniel Jones call, man. It's gonna make things hard for Wayne Gallman, let me tell you, when Daniel Jones is going nuts. But getting back to Robbie Anderson, I think people are going to be off him because he really hasn't gotten there in a while, and DJ Moore lately has been making the big plays and kind of showing out. But if Bridgewater comes back, Anderson is his favorite guy. He leads the team with a 26% target share, and he's every bit as likely to have a big game as Moore is against that Minnesota secondary, only he'll appear on less rosters. So those are 2 guys that I went up to 30% rostered on in my builds last week out of 150 lineups. Didn't really work out for Anderson, and it only kind of did for Parker, but I'm going to be looking to go back to the well, I think, pretty heavy on those guys this week.
All right, John, tell me about receivers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Phil did a nice job kind of summarizing some of the guys that I like. Jefferson's there. I think Parker, I think he mentioned him as a GPP play. I think he's cash game viable this week at 5,900. Pittman's on my list at the lower end, and this is where I really think we should spend a little bit of time is where are you spending down at this position? Because if you're spending up at running back, and it seems that's where at least Phil and I were, I know that Devin had a couple cheap guys he liked there. I think the game in Miami, is it in Miami? New York, the Jets in Miami. I have Rashad Perryman right now at 4,200 as being cash game viable this week. I do think that probably is contingent on which quarterback plays. I think if Flacco is playing versus Darnold, it makes a difference. As I think Phil said at the beginning of the show or even offline, it does make a difference there. Perriman seems to be the guy with Flacco, and Mims is the guy with Darnold. And N'Keal Harry is a guy, 3,400 against Arizona. I think this game is fairly high-paced. Last week, imagine Devin giving them.
It's the wrong receiver on that team.
Who are you going with?
Demir Bird at 4,100.
The deep play receiver you want for a cash game?
He has 16 targets in his last 2 games.
All right.
197 yards in his last 2 games, 16 targets. At 4,100, give me him.
He's certainly playing. He's playing a bunch of snaps. Jacoby Myers, at least we can agree that it looks like his stock has fallen.
What a mistake that was. We all loved, like the whole industry got on him, and that was.
Yeah, for me, it's N'Keal Harry. It seems like he's a guy that's trending upwards. Devin disagrees. He thinks it's Bird, but at least we do agree that there is a cheap receiver with the Patriots who looks to be in a good spot in a game that should be high scoring, high paced, and they're super cheap. Those are the guys I'm looking at in cash this week.
Devin, who do you like at receiver?
Yeah, I mentioned Demir Bird. He's probably my favorite cheap low-end guy. Cash games are a little bit tough. I would rather have Keenan Allen than Josh Jacobs. I would rather try and make that math work and go low at a running back position. So Keenan Allen to me is like Dalvin Cook in that he's the first or second name that I'm clicking. And at this point, how can you not? I mean, he's in a favorable matchup against Buffalo out of the slot. I love Keenan Allen this week. I love everything about him. Michael Thomas is interesting, and we didn't mention him. Not as a cash game play, but 7,400, he's looking like he's starting to get back to the top guy there. And what did he have last week? 10, 11 targets, something like that. So we've talked about Alvin Kamara not seeing a lot of those that work. And if Thomas is, there's a narrative there where Taysom Hill is a limited quarterback and he's a one-read guy, and he's just locking on to Michael Thomas. I think that's a real scenario. He had 12 targets last week. So as a GPP play, I'm fine with that. Going down the list, I think T. Higgins is a great GPP play at 4,700. He had 4 of Ryan Finley's 10 targets last week. So if you extrapolate that out a little bit, $4,700 to get the best receiver.
Catchable passes?
Yeah, but let's say that, I mean, if there's a receiver in Cincinnati that I want, it's T. Higgins. And he disappointed last week, and he'll be probably under-rostered because of Ryan Finley's horrible history in the NFL. So I think at 4,700, the talent's there where there's a 10 to 20% chance where he could pay that salary off. So for cash for me, it's Keenan Allen, Demir Bird, and I guess I need a third one, and that's where it gets really scary. So I don't mind the DeVante Parker call. Robbie Anderson is always cash game viable when Teddy Bridgewater is there, but it's really thin. I'll go Justin Jefferson.
Assuming that Adam Thielen is not playing.
Correct.
If Thielen's playing, then he's not cash game viable. We all agree on that, right?
Probably not.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I think we saw it last week when people tried playing him in cash games and he ended up with 5 targets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Corey Davis, one more name that I wanted to call out. So Corey Davis is seeing a little bit of an uptick. He has 10 receptions in his last 2 weeks, 180 yards against the Ravens and against the Ravens and Colts and Packers. So I think that my stats aren't showing up here properly, but I think that he's showing up where he could potentially be an emerging guy here.
He's got 4 of those last 5 games has really nice stat lines for Corey Davis. And for what it's worth, he's a guy I hate to play because if I play him, he lays an egg and vice versa. So I'm biased, but I can't argue with your kind of logic because he had 635-1, meaning 6 catches, 35 yards, and a touchdown, 128-1, and then he laid a goose egg against Chicago, 567 and 5-113 over the past 4 games. So, or 5 games, excuse me. So he's definitely trending upwards.
At 4,900, I mean, if you need a salary guy, I think he's cash viable. There is risk there, but you're sort of looking. If you go with Josh Jacobs up, you're sort of looking at these 4,900, 4,100 Damiere Byrds. You're not even going to get the DeVante Parkers unless he's your top receiver. So it's really hard. I think that if you're going to go down, it's Davis, it's Damiere Byrd, it's Pittman are all fine cash game plays this week. But I'm playing Keenan Allen.
I think the move this week is to pay down a quarterback at Ryan, which is where I think we landed, and then Cook and J-Rob. We all kind of like those guys collectively around 15,000. So that gets you around 20,000. We're gonna talk about defenses, but get a cheap defense, throw that in. You're at 22, and then tight end is coming up, and I think there's a couple ways to go there. But at the end of the day, you're not going to get a wide receiver who's above, say, 6K. I mean, you could go with Keenan Allen. I think he's a little overpriced in my opinion, but you're going to get a handful of guys who are going to be in the 4 to 6K range, and you're not going to feel great about it, at least as of Tuesday night. I mean, maybe things open up over the week, but this is where you're going to take some chances at wide receiver.
Anything in Kansas City? Demarcus Robinson?
For cash?
No. GPP. So, Tyreek, we talked about how are they going to score 29 points. Maybe it's Tyreek Hill at 7,800. He's always in play. Maybe it's Demarcus Robinson, who had 8 targets, and he's only 3,700. I'm not sure. I think that there's value in taking, if you're going to have multiple lineups for GPPs, taking a shot on 1 or 2 of these guys, but it's always difficult to figure out who Mahomes is going to spread the ball out to. I mean, for me, it's probably, I think Hill gets somewhat popular. Not extremely, but probably in the 10% range. And I'll watch DeMarcus Robinson. If he's under rostered, he could be he's always good for a long potential touchdown.
I mean, Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce are the obvious names there. And then it looks like Sammy Watkins is going to miss again this week, so he's not likely to be in
so it's
play
relatively limited, right? And
Right,
I think
exactly.
Byron Pringle is out, so do they bring McCole Hardman back? I don't even know. It's really those 3.
Demarcus Robinson ran quite a few routes last week without Sammy Watkins, so he's a guy that at 3,700 I think would be interested. But I will say, as of today, Travis Kelce is the guy that's jumping off my model. He's 11% to make GPP value, and that's with Sammy Watkins being active. So I imagine that jumps up if Watkins is inactive.
So let's do a quick cash game recap on wide receivers before we go to tight ends here. We said if you can afford it and you're willing to go a little scarier at other receivers maybe than Keenan Allen, you might be able to fit into your lineup. But it sounds like you're probably more likely to hit on some cheaper guys here so that you can pay up at running back. That's kind of what I feel like I heard from you, John. Yeah. And so those cheaper receivers that you're feeling good enough about maybe in cash, guys like DeVante Parker, Michael Pittman, maybe Robbie Anderson. Maybe
Robbie Anderson.
Yeah.
Rashad Perryman.
Anderson's too expensive for cash at 61.
Yeah.
So I think for me, and I'll throw Perryman in there just because John mentioned him, it's Corey Davis, Michael Pittman, Rashad Perryman, Damiere Byrd is my favorite.
Oh, yeah.
And then Keenan Allen at the top. If you want to throw some Curtis Samuel in there, I think he's interesting at 5,100. But those are really the names that at least I'm looking at. I'm sure John and I will have updates in our articles that we have throughout the week. So
yeah. That's an important one to keep an eye on.
I'll give you one more real quick in that 5K range for cash, and that's Sterling Shepard. In his last 4 games, 8, 10, 8, and 6 targets. He's going up against that Bengals defense. I think he's pretty safe too. He's another one in that Pittman range that you could consider for cash.
So I'm trying to do a build over here, and we're going to go to tight ends, and I'll go to you first, John, on tight ends. I'm trying to do a build here, and it's really hard to have enough salary to pay up at tight end. I feel like I can't go over 4K at tight end with the guys we're mentioning here. Is that how you're seeing it?
Yeah, it's really tough. I mean, that's where you're going to have to make the decisions. I think you have, in on my list, and this is typically what I do with my articles. I'll give you a guy at the high end and a guy at the low end, and you can kind of build your lineups accordingly. This week at the high end, it's Darren Waller, as it often is against Atlanta. He's definitely the number 1 receiver there in Las Vegas, and we talked about how much we like that game. There's a real possibility you might not be able to get there. And so if you're going down, I want you to take the other tight end in that same game. I think Hayden Hurst is realistically an option at 3,900. Outside of that, I don't like a whole lot in terms of safe options this week. So take a tight end in that game and then move on to the next position.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was seeing. Devin, how do you feel about tight end there?
Yeah, so I mean, if you want to go Travis Kelce, let's just play the scenario out.
Sure.
Here are the decisions you're going to have to make.
Right.
Let's assume you're playing Dalvin Cook.
Right.
You're going to have to make a decision between. I have a build.
You're not getting Keenan Allen in that scenario.
Correct. You could get James Robinson.
Yes.
So you could get Dalvin Cook, Frank Gore, James Robinson.
Okay.
And then have 5 Michael Pittman, Corey Davis, Damiere Byrd, and that's a decent cash game lineup. I mean,
that's really dicey at receiver.
That hurts.
Though.
I mean, you skipped right over Frank Gore like that was an easy.
No, it's not. It's not. But that's the price you're going to have to pay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
so, if you want Kelce and Robinson, because Dalvin Cook is so expensive, and that's.
I don't think you can go there. You save $1,000 from Kelce, and roll with Waller, who we know is the number 1 receiver on the team. And if you
that
Hurst,
1,000 doesn't get you anything.
Well, you can go up from Frank Gore to Gallman, at least.
And the other thing I didn't mention that I should have is that we have real questions about maybe Julio Jones this week.
Yeah.
And if he's inactive, then Hurst becomes almost a must play because he becomes the number 2 receiver on a team that's supposed to score a ridiculous number, 27 points. So,
right.
He's basically half price from Kelce with less options.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And there's builds that you can get Gallman in there as well, instead of if you go down to the Vikings defense. But I don't know that. I think it's either, I hate to say it, but I think it's either Kelce or it's go down to Hurst. That's the decision. I don't think Waller's in play because I don't think Waller has the upside, and you don't really get anything for that extra $1,000. We talked about wide receivers, and is there really a difference between Corey Davis and DeVante Parker, maybe, but is that worth the cost of Kelce to Waller? I don't think it is. So that's the trade-off decision that you're going to have to make. As far as for me, I'm going down because I want Keenan Allen and I think he's safer, which means I'm going Hayden Hurst at the moment. But I'm just talking through hypotheticals, as I think a lot of people are going to wrangle with the decision of, I want a Kansas City player in my cash game, but the decisions that you're going to, in the trade-offs that you're going to have to make are pretty significant.
It's going to be tough to get a Kansas City player in your cash game the way that we're building these. It is. Phil, what do you think about tight end?
Don't really have much to add. I mean, if you could get the guy that fits into my cash game build is Darren Waller. I found a way to make his 6K work. I can't get up to Kelce as much as I would love to.
Right.
To Devin's point, right, on the season, he's the tight end one on DraftKings scoring by a 45% margin over Waller, who is number 2. The gap between the two is a canyon. So Devin's point is definitely well taken there.
Yeah.
And he also happens to have a good matchup. Not that it matters for him, but Tampa Bay has allowed 41% more PPR points than the league average to tight ends over the last 5 weeks.
Yeah.
So maybe I've just convinced myself to rethink my strategy and look for a way to jam Kelce into this thing.
And maybe more value opens up later in the week, and you can jam Kelce in there. And I think you got to keep that in mind. But as of now, I don't think you're getting Kelce in your lineup unless your receivers look real ugly.
Yeah, unless you go down to the Keelan Cole, Chris Conley area.
Right,
but,
which I would not recommend.
There is a build where you could have Kelce, and you're not going to feel great. But that's the price you pay to go up and have that tight end.
Sure. Let's move on to defenses.
Are there any other tight ends that are cheap that guys like?
Austin Hooper makes a little bit of sense in GPPs, but not for cash games.
Yeah,
you don't trust Jordan Reed in cash games. Rob Gronkowski at 4,400.
I'd rather go Hunter Henry, but
right, exactly.
Yeah,
so I don't think so.
Yeah, to me, and I'm just looking at FanDuel real quick. I mean, maybe I go Hunter Henry at 59 over Hayden Hurst because of the touchdown upside. If they're close to the goal line, Gurley's getting some carries, and we've seen him butcher some of that. So maybe Henry on FanDuel, but the price difference on DraftKings is too high.
Yep. All right, let's hit defenses pretty quick, and then we'll cover some stacks. Phil, who do you like at defense this week? Probably somebody cheap because we're trying to make up salary.
Yeah, the one that I had gone with to make it all fit was the Broncos, who are way down there. And my only thinking there was, let's see if Taysom Hill could do this versus an actual pro caliber defensive line after a week in which now the opposition has some tape to study of him playing quarterback. Because let me just check my notes here. It says that he hasn't played a full game at quarterback since junior high school. So no tape on him since junior high.
That's not true, but okay.
Yeah, that's not true. But my point is the Broncos actually have something to look at. They have a quality defense, at least up front, that could get some pressure on them. So let's see if they could force some mistakes. And, I think if you could get to him, you want the Giants against Ryan Finley. And that's for all the reasons that we've already discussed. The guy is not good.
John, defense.
Yeah, I mean, we can make this quick. I know we're running over. I like the Giants if you can get to them against Finley for the same reason. The Jets against Miami. We don't know what the quarterback situation there is. I'm spending down this position for all the reasons we've talked about for the first 50 minutes of the show. And if you can get up to the Browns against Jacksonville, Jake Luton has not looked good. But I think, spend down. That's the message that I think we're all going to convey in this segment.
Denver Broncos.
Yep, I agree.
Right on. All right, let's go to stacks. Let's go back to you, John, to talk about stacks. Who are you stacking this week?
All right, it goes without saying, but I'll say it. Kansas City, Tampa Bay, any way you can get it. Get them all in there. Find your favorite 3K crapper, as we call them. Slot that person in, slot 2 of them in, and then build out around them with Kansas City, Tampa Bay, any way you can. I do like Tua with DeVante Parker, running it back with one of your favorite Jets receivers, whether that be Perriman or Mims. And then I'll close out by saying, which one do I like? Josh Allen with, and this will make Devin cringe.
Cole Beasley.
Josh Allen, Cole Beasley, and Kalen Ballage. That's the ABB stack that's going to win me the Millie Maker on Sunday.
Yikes.
ABB, remember it.
Phil, who you stacking this week?
I like Phillip Rivers with Naheem Hines and Michael Pittman. And then you could run that back with either Derrick Henry and or A.J. Brown. I like the other side of the Buffalo game where you could do Herbert with Keenan Allen and then Diggs as your run back, or maybe even John Brown, who like really needed a week off to get back to full strength. And then in tournaments, obviously you could also do the Teddy, assuming he plays. If not, the PJ Walker double stack with both Anderson and Moore. And then you got Jefferson and Cook coming back the other way to stack that game up.
Devin, who you stacking? Wrap us up.
Deep GPP sleeper, Baker Mayfield and Rashard Higgins.
Wait. You mentioned Mayfield as a play? You said you would never, ever do that.
As a 1 or 2% chance, I think that Higgins is the deep threat, and I talked about him. The weather's been holding him back. They've had 3 awful weather games in a row. If they're ever going to have a passing attack, and I mean ever, and they have playoff aspirations, this has to be the game.
What about Hodge?
Oof.
He's playing more snaps than Higgins. This is a question that I was asking myself earlier.
Ugh. I mean, sure. I don't like it. Like,
that's a no.
But you like Higgins more than Hodge.
I do, yeah. I think Higgins is the best receiver on that team.
All right.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for our show. Check out all of our content over at footballguys.com. If you missed our Thanksgiving Slate show and it's before Thanksgiving, go check out the Thanksgiving Slate show. If it's after Thanksgiving, ignore it.
Click on it and give us a view.
Yeah, give us a view if you'd like. Also, be sure to check out Saturday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, live with Devin. He's going to be answering questions live on YouTube. So be sure to check that out. The Live with Devin show, Saturday, 9 p.m. Eastern time. He did it last week. Got some great visitors, great questions, and they chatted for like an hour. It was awesome.
They convinced me to come back.
Is it 9 p.m. Eastern, just to be sure?
And it's 9 p.m. Eastern. And we'll be back next Friday morning with our Week 13 episode. On behalf of John Lee, Devin Knotts, and Phil Alexander, I'm Austin Lee saying thank you for watching, and thanks for being a football guy. Be sure to check out all of our content over at footballguys.com/DFS by clicking the button in front of Devin's face. And if you'd like to subscribe to our YouTube channel, be sure to press the button that's on Phil's face. And if you want to see our latest video, click that giant box that's in front of John Lee's face. Check all that stuff out. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching.